when they get a chance to do that and build their self-esteem, their observer gets very, very strong because they can see things as the truth of what it is versus the interpretation of what we thought it was.
I mean, it started out as a fun thing when you're a kid, right? And all the kids are doing it. It's the 80s, right? Everybody smokes. Um, and as I watched my friends slough off the habit and I continued to go back to it and go back to it and go back to it, I realized, yeah, this has really got a grip on me. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the ADHD Eavesdrop, where you can be a butterfly on the wall and listen in on my conversations. Today, after a very long absence, I'm so happy to say that Cheryl Dics is back with us today. And not only am I excited that Cheryl's back, she's got exciting stuff for us, which makes it even better. So Cheryl is just finishing up her great new course, Personal Recovery and Emotional Intelligence, which I'm going to be honest with you, is Cheryl's life right there in one beautiful box. And today we're going to talk about what we call a sampler to get an idea of what you might get out of the course and give you some great insights today. And hopefully you'll take away some information about that. But Cheryl, I'm so excited to have you back. First of all, it's been too long. And I'm so excited to hear this is what you've been working on in your absence. And it's all really good stuff. And I know this is what you love. So welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And yeah, sorry about my absence. I had a little illness I had to rectify. And so we're back on the mend. So we've decided to officially launch the course. This has been a bit of my baby for a while. And so I just it's a personal journey. And I want to just dive into a bit about my story and why I decided to create this course for other people.
Awesome. So personal recovery. What are we talking about when we talk about personal recovery?
Sure. So personal recovery, I had to sit with this, and I was telling Janine earlier, I just kind of had a vision last night, and the vision was, I grew up, it was kind of tough, I didn't have all the best options available to me, and I used to smoke cigarettes, and, I started smoking at 13 and I quit at 35, and, but when I quit smoking, then I started to binge eat. And I was eating and eating and eating. I gained a whole bunch of weight. And then after I stopped binge eating, then I realized I couldn't stop drinking alcohol. I did drink alcohol throughout my whole life, but it really kind of took hold of me in my late 40s. And COVID-19 kind of, shot a light into my world and just said, hey, you got to do something different. You have two choices here. You can keep doing what you're doing. Your family's not talking to you. Your husband's mad at you. Your kids are frustrated. Or you can take a hold of your life. And I also got diagnosed with, late ADHD. So, I'm diving into the medication, and that's a journey in and of itself. So when I really kind of sat with it, I realized that I didn't have an addiction problem. I have a coping problem. And and I used to be in first response. So I was a workaholic. Everything revolved around the job. Everything revolved around the next client or the next crisis. So I was always thinking, right? So didn't I just have a coping problem? I also have a thinking problem. So, getting some support, and I highly encourage anyone who's dealing with any form of addiction to consider 12 steps. It's a beautiful program. There's hundreds of them depending on what you need. And, you find your tribe there. You find people that think like you think, believe like you believe, and they'll help you through the tougher times. So doing that, there's this emotional intelligence part, which made me realize that I had no idea what an emotion was. I was happy, mad, frustrated, angry. Sometimes I would touch joy, but that was a little bit scary. And I didn't know how to set any boundaries. So everyone's behavior outside of me could dictate how I was feeling. Someone gave me a look, it's like, oh, they don't like me. Or, my boss gets mad at me, and then it was like, I'm not good enough. All of these sort of things. But I started to go, who's that voice? Who's that voice anyway that's talking to me? So when I worked through the 12 steps, so I'm a proud member of AA, and I've done all of the 12 steps, and I sponsor and I work with people. I realized that that was one of our issues, was that we have no idea what we're feeling. And when we don't like what we're feeling, or we don't want to deal with what we're feeling, or we don't want to deal with some hard truths, we have a solution. So I work with sex addicts, I've worked with gamblers, I've worked with alcoholics, obviously, drug addicts, workaholics. I have clients that are workaholics, because that's the solution. So it's like, okay, so if I've done all the work and I've sponsored people, I know what emotional intelligence is. And I realized with emotional intelligence is that I could touch it. I could touch that hard thing. I could touch that trauma. I could touch that why I wanted to have a drink or why I wanted to escape. And when I teach people about emotional intelligence, and I personally do the work every day, I feel lighter. I feel better. I feel more courageous. I feel that I can accept my life in life's terms. And strangely, I felt peaceful, maybe for the first time in almost 50 years. And so for me, when I work with people, they say to me, how did you figure this out? How did you figure it out? Like, you've changed my life in just such a short period of time. They're like, you have to teach this. So I dove in and I put my vulnerabilities on lock, and I dove in and I created this course. So it's a 10-part series. So this series is going to talk about basically foundation rebuilding. So for us to learn who we are, we got to rebuild our foundation. So it starts just understanding that we have a mind, which is a thinker, and we have a body. So what our mind thinks, our body responds, and it has a somatic response. And in that somatic response is created via emotions. You know, we can get into all the scientific stuff about amygdalas and, you know, frontal cortexes and the dopamine and norepinephrines and all that stuff. But that's another podcast, obviously. So this is a practical course. This isn't why we do this stuff. This is, okay, you do that stuff. What are we going to do about it? And so I teach people about our spirit. So I strongly believe, and from my own personal experience, is that we have to be mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually well. So that's what this course is going to teach you, is to even understand what that even means. And so we have this mind who has a thinker, we have a body who has a response, and then we have a spirit that was placed within us upon our conception, and who is actually perfect. So there's a whole realm, a whole series part about being perfect. And I know that makes people feel weird, but it's okay. It's okay to feel weird. Guess what? You just had an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to understand that we actually have an observer. So we're going to do this work from an observer perspective. And we're going to actually take the time to do like a personal inventory and to see what our thoughts are, to see how we interact with other people, how we handle conflict, how we handle challenges, how we feel about ourselves. If our self-esteem is low, which most people's are, because they've never actually done the work or did a deep dive, when they get a chance to do that and build their self-esteem, their observer gets very, very strong, because they can see things as the truth of what it is versus the interpretation of what we thought it was. And we deal with our projections. So how are we projecting ourselves onto other people? So understanding sort of fear. I'm very, very competent and proud to be a Sedona facilitator. So there's the Sedona method. You can go to sedonamethod.com. It dives really deeply into emotional intelligence, and I've taken all their courses, and it's a wonderful, wonderful program. But we're going to just keep it really simple in the beginning here and just give you the basic highlights of how to touch emotions, how to release emotions, and start to deal with some of the paradigms, some of the limiting beliefs that have been holding us back, sometimes even since childhood. So we're also going to talk about shadows. So Carl Jung is the creator of shadows. And if you know who that guy is, he is absolutely brilliant. And he's from the Freudian days. So he created what's called the shadow and their personas. So we dive a little bit into this so that you can understand why we kind of disassociate a little bit and allow these scripts to run our show and ultimately harm us. So when we can release those paradigms, those beliefs, and those personas and heal them and comfort them, then they no longer need to run our show. So then we become the driver in the seat, and then we can thrive and really then be the truth of who you are and live authentically.
Wow. That sounds like a great course with a lot of stuff in it. So can you give us a little taste of something that I might get from your course when I'm taking it? Because I myself am trying to shake a uh yeah, a difficult addiction
Mhm.
with nicotine right now. And I have been smoking for on and off for about 40 years. Started when I was around 14 and eventually gave up the cigarettes and switched to these lovely little vapes. And really helped me get off of the cigarettes. I still do believe that vapes are a little bit less dangerous than cigarettes, but I wouldn't say they're not dangerous at all. And they're not good for your health. And so I am trying at this point to give that up. So I'm looking for a nugget of wisdom that I might be able to take away to help me with that.
Well, admitting it's the first step, admitting that you're using that tool to do what, right? We're using it to cope. We're using it to de-stress. We're using it to just take a break. All of that. We're getting a sense of relief when we use a product or we use a substance or we find ourselves a solution. So sometimes I can eat 3 cookies and that's my solution. But what are you actually avoiding?
Hmm. Right now, I'm not probably avoiding a whole lot. I'm pretty happy. I recently retired a couple years ago, but I would say prior to that, I was definitely avoiding stress, my job, everything, my world of chaos before I was diagnosed with ADHD. I mean, it started out as a fun thing when you're a kid, right? You know, and all the kids are doing it. It's the 80s, right? Everybody smokes. Um, and, you know, as I watched my friends slough off the habit and I continued to go back to it and go back to it and go back to it, I realized, yeah, this has really got a grip on me. And about the time I'd be like, okay, I can let this go, something stressful would happen. And I would go right back for that nicotine, for that cigarette. And I think part of why I feel like I can give it up now is because I don't feel like I'm escaping anything as much anymore. It's just I'm addicted to nicotine and I'm addicted to cigarette or not cigarettes, but vapes. Um, so I did get a little substitute, you know, and this one just has flavored air in it to kind of take care of that hand to mouth thing. Um, but it evolved. It started as fun, then it turned into habit, and then I then had stress, and then it was a coping mechanism that I was using all the time. And I used it in high school even that way, to be honest with you. Um, and now it's just stuck, you know, because I it's been there so long and I can't shake it.
That's brilliant. I love the way you articulated that because I don't think anyone picks up a drink to says, "Oh, I'm going to be an alcoholic now. Look at right. I'm going to smoke some pot and I plan on still having a full-time job, or instead I'm sitting playing video games for 15 hours a day, high as a kite." We didn't decide that, right? We decided we made some choices when we first, started. We wanted to be cool. We wanted to be fun. We wanted to relax. We wanted to lower inhibitions. We wanted to have a great time, so on and so forth. There's lots of reasons on why we try to use a substance for whatever the case may be. But you brought in there, I was using it to cope. And I'm not going to lie to you. That's what you said. I'm going to use it to cope. And that's a part of that admission, right? Admitting that this is why I use this product, right? And, or I gambled, or I was using porn, or I was, playing video games. A lot of our teenagers are really lost in TikTok and Instagram and video game, usage because it's feeding that sort of dopamine side of the brain. And that dopamine gets a hit and then you feel better because you get these positive feelings, right? So what happens when that lowers, the dopamine lowers, we don't get that, have that dopamine hit. So we get what's called withdrawal.
Hmm.
And then even though the problem has been solved, or you're no longer needing it for those coping issues, it's no longer needing the solution, it still has a hold of you. So that's where the transition took place is okay, now You're not using it for that, but now you need me physiologically, right?
And psychologically.
And psychologically, 100%. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to teach you about that. And one of like, so step one's admitting that that's the target, right? This is the target you want to work on. You want to drop the vape. So step two is going to be the difference, understanding the difference between a choice versus a decision. So I chose to quit drinking. I can't tell you how many times. I poured alcohol down the sink saying I'm never going to drink again. I woke up from blackouts and said, like, that's so scary. That's never going to happen again. And it did. I'm going to be a great mom. I wasn't. I was going to be great in my job. I struggled. But that's when it had switched. It was fun for a while. It was the end of the night, have a glass of wine at dinner. And then it was 2 glasses, and then it was 3 glasses, and then it was a bottle on the weekend. And for women, unfortunately, addiction and in alcohol specifically, or sugar-based products, it can get a hold of us quickly. But the same is for like vapes or marijuana or online shopping, et cetera, like that. You're going to still get that dopamine hit, right? So that's the actual addiction, is creating that hit of dopamine. And so unfortunately, the statistics are quite high of people that have ADHD who are dealing with addiction issues. So understanding that sort of dopamine part, but there is a cure. So this creates the whole choice versus a decision. So do you know the definition of a choice?
Well, it's picking between options.
Yeah, picking between 2 options, right? So I might say I'm going to have a salad for lunch, or I'm going to have a bag of chips. Yeah, you might feel a lot of push-pull there, right? So if you're dealing with food addiction, or you're dealing with a food addict, if you ask them that question, their mind is going to say, eat the salad because it's good for you. But the body's saying, eat the chips, eat the chips, eat the chips, eat the chips. So choices, you can manipulate that. So I like to use an example of, say, a New Year's resolution. It's midnight, everyone's celebrating, and my New Year's resolution last year was to stop eating anything out of a package, box, or bag. 3 o'clock the next afternoon, I'm eating pierogies in my air fryer with bacon. And I was like, what happened? Right? How I was settled, I was convinced, I knew what I was going to do. I'm not going to eat anything that's processed, ultra processed. I'm just not going to do it. 12 hours later, I'm doing it. Why? And I feel bad about it. I enjoyed the chip when I ate it, or the pierogies when I ate it, but I didn't, 5 hours later or 5 minutes later, I'm like, oh, I failed. Oh, right. And then you start beating yourself up. So as we try to quit something, you're going to go through that, right? And you're going to feel that, and you're going to give up. And so recovery work, personal recovery work, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery, right? So when we make choices, they're manipulatable. We can change them. It's a choice between 2 things. So if I choose to not say drink or drink, I have options, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're trying to quit something, we have to be very thoughtful. This is why the step two is very important, is the difference is in a decision. I'll give you an example. Did you decide to have a child?
Well, I decided to try to have one.
Okay. So when you decided and said, okay, we have enough money, we are married, we're happy, my life feels like perfect, I'm ready to include a new life into my life, right?
Mhm.
And then you made a decision.
Right.
It was no longer negotiable. Well, that's what we're going to ask you to do here. We're going to ask you to stop with the choices and make a decision to stop doing a behavior that's hurting you or harming you. Because once you've done that, it's done. Yes, there's going to be struggle along the way. Yes, you're going to feel all those emotions and those struggles and those conflicts that are within you because you don't have that coping mechanism. So you're going to have a strategy in place. But if we just make choices and say, yeah, I'm not going to have chocolate today, but I didn't say I wasn't going to have chocolate tomorrow, right? That's a choice. So you see how you can manipulate it, you can play with it, you can reason with it, you can come up with excuses. So we're going to teach you about learning how to make a decision for yourself. And so when we do that, that's a decision not to quit a product. but that's a decision to say, I'm important. I matter. I'm going to look at all things me. And that takes courage and bravery and some personal self-acceptance that, hey, guess what? I'm not perfect.
I think it was Mark Twain who said, I've quitting smoking is not a problem. I've done it hundreds of times. So I'm trying to figure out how to make sure that this one sticks.
Right. And again, we're back to that choice versus decision, right? If
So
you
what if
look
I
at
fall off?
that, we call it a relapse, but that's the whole point. Like that's a little bit more advanced in that way of okay, you've made the decision, so let's start rebuilding the foundation from the bottom. We got to create the right cornerstone and the right foundational position. So when you know why you're doing what you're doing and that you have support within yourself, you always hear me say this, the answer is within. And I'm going to teach you how to find that. So we talk a lot about, this is where we're going to bring in the mind, the body, and the spirit.
This conversation was a great conversation, but it got a little bit long. So I decided to break it up into two parts. So today we finished this part, and I will be releasing the second part next week. I hope you come back and hear all about the mind, body, and spirit.